So quiet it's a funny word, especially when we talk about it with Green Bank. Green Bank calls itself the quietest town in America. That's like a strong aspect of life in the quiet zone and even like culture there of getting away from it all. Not being interfered with, not being bothered by other people or by the society around you.
I was very fortunate to be able to work throughout pandemic remotely. I've moved out of my New York apartment in April of 2020, right after I recovered from COVID. I lived in Hell's Kitchen at the time, and I just let go of my apartment. And I was fortunate to be able to live a year and a half in Airbnb. I hear from people who come here to stay with me, they actually understand the value of downtime, the value of not being connected, the value of not watching Netflix 24/7. I loved the concept of being less attached to a cell phone. I thought it's a very smart move to give yourself an opportunity to step down, get yourself a little less connected to the world and more connected to yourself, be more present to your environment.
The most recent group to be trying to get away from it all are known as the electrosensitives. So these are people who feel physically ill. They're made physically ill to the point of extreme sickness and even death by the radio waves that are all around us, from microwaves, from Wi-Fi, from cell phones. So hundreds of people with this illness called electromagnetic hypersensitivity have moved here to the Green Bank area.
This is placed by coincidence because the observatory, they can't use their equipment well if there are cell phone towers and too much microwave radiation. So a lot of electrosensitives have come here because it's the only place in the world that exists like this. You know, when I started using computers myself, it started bothering me. And people using cell phones, I started being able to feel it, particularly a little spot here, which would tingle.
So the National Radio Quiet Zone is 13,000 square miles. It goes as far south as almost Charlotte, Virginia. It has the city of Stanton, Virginia within it. And it goes up to, like, I think the edge of Maryland, and it has pretty much all of West Virginia in it. A lot of people live in the National Radio Quiet Zone and have no idea.
So there's a state-mandated 10-mile radius directly around the observatory, and within that radius, people are not supposed to have what are called intentional transmitters, so not just land-based transmitters. There's not a cell phone tower within that 10-mile radius, so there's no cell signal within the area. But things like microwaves, Wi-Fi routers, again, Bluetooth speakers, essentially anything that operates wirelessly is not supposed to be had within that area. We are in the National Radio Quiet Zone. That's a federally mandated, protected area. It's a 13,000 square mile zone. And it was picked in 1958 after this site was chosen to be the spot for a National Radio Astronomy Observatory in 1956 with the purpose of being able to protect the science that is going on here. They looked at 30 valleys within 400 miles of DC where their headquarters are located, and they picked Green Bank because we have such a low population density. So very few people living in the area, and of course if there are fewer people, there's fewer potential sources of electronic equipment to create interference. So that's why the site was chosen. Also because of the valley here, so the telescope's surrounded by mountains. Those mountains will act as physical barriers and protect the telescope from other waves of interference.
Can the quiet zone remain a quiet zone? There's like a paradox to it almost, that like when people are attracted to the quiet stops being so quiet. That tension is also felt there in Green Bank, with the people there feeling pressure to have Wi-Fi, just for the sake of something simple like education. I even did a drive around recently with like the quiet zone cop who works at the observatory, who kind of does patrols of the area looking for illegal renegade radio wave signals. And we came up with like 250 Wi-Fi hotspots within just like a several mile radius of the observatory. It seems like everybody has Wi-Fi, and it seems like a lot of people who I'm talking to, they also have cell phones.
I think the quietness of Green Bank will be preserved. So we work really closely with NRAO and the National Radio Dynamic Zone to make sure that we are keeping it as quiet as possible. So we always have exceptions. So if emergency services needs to use radios, like of course we want emergency services to use radios. That's life is a higher priority. So it's going to be harder as more satellites go up. We'll be seeing those signals more and more. So my interest lies in machine learning and using machine learning to sort of understand how we can remove these signals without having to manually remove them ourselves. But I think it's just going to be a collaboration between scientists and the surrounding community, and just making sure that we're keeping the spectrum as clean as possible. We also sometimes have to accept that some people are never going to be happy with the decisions we make with the observatory being here. But our goal is to make sure that the communities and the Green Bank Observatory can work together to make sure that we stay a radio quiet zone.
I live in Green Bank. I just moved here from Texas, and I live in our employee housing. So the federal government did buy up and build quite a few houses in the surrounding area. I don't have a microwave in my home, and it's actually written into my lease that I will not own a microwave. I also don't have Wi-Fi. I do have Ethernet, which is cabled internet, in case anybody's forgotten, because I totally forgot what that was. At least with the kids that I work with during summer camp, it might be a little hard to get them to not carry their cell phones around, but eventually they ditch them or leave them in the bunkhouse anyways because they can't snap anybody, and those like messages aren't going anywhere and they're not getting anything, so they'd wait in line at the end of the day to call their parents from any one of our landlines here in the Science Center or down at the bunkhouse. I was majorly, I don't want to say addicted to my phone, but considerably dependent on it, and it's been nice to break away from it a little bit, especially here at work, because I can't open my TikTok and it won't load, which is good. And then I can go home and plug in my phone, and I still have access, to Instagram, and I update all my friends about what I'm doing. But it's nice to have a clear division between my work life and my home life, which is exacerbated by that lack of internet access or wireless internet access. I started reading again. That's crazy. I haven't done that in forever. Haven't sat through a full book in probably a year. I haven't taken my asthma medication in like months, and my lungs don't hurt. It's great. I've been reborn.